Okay, I see people filtering into the fleet. If you find your fleet finder window, you should be able to see it. The FC will be Professor Amvion, I think. So the plan is to have a conversation about small gang, fly-in small gang, how it works, get into some ships that are suitable for this, and then we'll go and get some practice out in space, positioning. There's a few things that, if you're interested in this, you might want to change afterwards. Things like being able to see brackets in space all the time, the setup of your windows and things. Maybe some skills to train. We'll try and touch on various things. It's one of those topics that is actually multifaceted in the sense that when you first start playing Eve, there's a lot to learn, an awful lot to learn. And flying in a small gang fleet kind of brings together a lot of different components of the things you need to learn, the skills you need to train. So it's not unsuitable for new players, right? Because a day one character can learn this way of playing the game, can enjoy it, can be very powerful playing this in a group, playing this game in this way. But that being said, there are some absolutely fundamental skills that you might want to touch on. And we'll try and cover all of those things. It'll just be somewhat disjointed because the conversation will probably be a little bit free-flowing. So we'll start properly, and I'll explain it all properly. But that's the kind of vibe, right? We're going to try and touch on various topics. We're going to try and get out in space and actually see what it's like to try and position your own ship, position yourself in relation to the enemy, and we'll go from there. There will be a lot of us, perhaps. I'm seeing a lot of people. Normally, a small gang will consist of about, I don't know, 5 to 15 players, or 5 to 15 ships in space. That's kind of your average. But it doesn't matter that there could be 50 of us. We can still practice the same skills. So while I'm talking, if everyone could just find, if you want to join in on the practical element, a ship from the KSG doctrine. If you're very new at the game, I'll link some very accessible fits in fleet. But for now, think about any ship from the KSG doctrine. We don't intend on dying, so there's no plan for people to die, but it's not impossible. I can't guarantee the NPCs won't kill you. If you could bring anything really, but we will need a bit of a combination of DPS, so perhaps battle cruiser or cruiser size DPS ships. We'd be happy to have frigates that can do things like damps, so things like a Maulus, Crucifier. We could do with, 1 or 2 tackle ships perhaps, or people can bring a tackle ship if you want to practice a very fast and unwieldy little ship. Anything from the KSG doctrine. So I'm not really able to go through exactly how to find that stuff, but if people start to sort of chat in fleet chat, I'm sure people will help you identify something, okay? The reason that we're not going to shoot real people is because you can't really, unless you arrange a fight, you can't really set things up. And I did promise that it would be a very much a beginner-friendly practical where people would have time to digest the information on grid, and that's the reason. But there will still be a bit of chaos. Right, okay, let's have a chat then. Small gang. Some of you here will be very familiar with how to fly in small gang. Some of you may think, what are these people talking about? I've never heard of this. How can we do small gang if there's like 50 of us? That kind of thing. Okay, we'll cover that now. The idea of most small gang fleets is that people are flying their own ship. They're punching above their weight. They're trying to pick engagements that are favorable against the stronger opponent, okay? So normally when you fly around in this game and you're looking for targets to shoot, the people that you're shooting have a lot of backup. You can find small scale fights in this game if you look in the right places, but generally the easiest content to find and the most likely predictable content to find is going to be large groups that are trying to defend their space, as they say. So if you go roaming into nullsec and you go into pandemic horde space, if you stay there long enough, they will bring about 50 people to come and shoot you. So what do small groups do when that happens? Well, they fly ships that are faster. They fly them in a way that is quite deceptive. They appear more vulnerable than they are, and they bait their enemy into running into them, and they shoot them while they are also running away. They group themselves up and position themselves together, but they don't anchor on one person. Each person is flying their own ship. They're manual piloting. They're making their own decisions. The FC or the FCs are just calling targets. They're just giving advice. They're just giving a general direction to fly in. They're just giving a general strategy. The people flying the ships need to make decisions about what am I going to damp, or what am I going to shoot, or which direction am I going to go in. So the only real way to explain all of this is to kind of get on grid with something and kind of try and practice it. Normally that happens when you go on your first fleet, small gang type fleet, or even any other fleet really. The first time you really have to position yourself in a chaotic situation against real players is when you're actually in combat. So today, the idea is to try and slow that process right down. We're trying to take it step by step and give people a chance to really think about how this works and to try and practice it. Eve is a game where, information overload doesn't really stop for, well, probably a decade or more of playing. It's quite a normal part of the game to be overloaded with far too much information. That is never truer than when you first land on a grid and you're asked to shoot some real players. You'll suddenly find, well, most people do, that you've lost all control over your mouse and your eyeballs, and they're darting around the screen looking at irrelevant information or staring at a health bar as it slowly chips down instead of taking in information in front of you. And then you die. That's kind of the experience of most people. But a lot of people find it so fun and thrilling and engaging that they keep doing it, and they keep doing it until they get better. I'm sure that's the case with the vast majority of the people who go on to play this game in a serious way when it comes to PvP. It starts off chaotic and confusing, and it just gets a little bit less chaotic and confusing as time goes on. So the minimum you need for a PvP small gang fleet would be perhaps some DPS, as we call it. So if you're going to kill anything, you need to be able to apply damage to it. So you need DPS. You also need a way of stopping that thing from running away. So that's an element of control. So you need some sort of tackle. And then on top of that, you need some staying power. So either your target is going to be unable to shoot you, that's one option, or you're going to be able to repair yourself if they do, or you've got enough buffer or other techniques you can employ to prevent yourself dying before they do. Now, all of that is possible in just one ship. So if you were to take a ship that had a tackle module on it, like a warp disruptor, some DPS, say some guns or drones, and you had, a way of self-repairing, or you were fast and agile enough not to be shot and hit by your target, well, congratulations, that's your small gang fleet started off. So yeah, one person can do all of this on their own. Often, in many groups, that's how the fight starts, right? Just one person. To take it up a notch, then you might have ships in specialized roles. So you might have a specialized tackle ship, perhaps an interceptor, perhaps a malediction, for example. Something that is, specialized and the best at tackling things. And then perhaps with that tackle ship, the DPS is brought along with it. So, a malediction and perhaps a DPS cruiser would be, again, 2 people. That's fine. That's great. And then you can just build upon that, right? So as more and more people join your fleet, you can bring more tackle, more DPS. You can bring other control, things like Weber fires to slow people down, things like links in command destroyers to make your tank better, to make your speed better, to make your tackle range faster, things like that. You could bring maybe some logi to increase your staying power. You could bring things like damps to reduce your target's lock-in range or slow their lock-in down. You could maybe bring some tracking disruptors or missile disruptors to reduce their DPS, to give your fleet, again, more staying power on grid, so you don't have to run away as much. And typically all of these ships would be fit in a way that meant they were faster than your enemy at least, and fit in a way that they could be independent. So perhaps not really relying on other ships within the fleet to escape or pull range or just fly around in space. Typically people also use of things like overheating. So they'll take some nanite repair paste with them. They might have filaments to give them a bit of extra mobility. They might have other ways of getting about. Perhaps they use ansiblexes or wormholes or things like that. So you do need a way of traveling as well. And that tends to be your kind of basics of small gang. A few people in a few ships that can take on any target that is small enough or has enough weaknesses that small ships can affect it. And then trying to take some fights and get some victories, right? Most small gang approaches are a case of taking the fight that you can take, shooting the things you can shoot, and then when things get too difficult or you can't kill anything anymore, running away, extracting. And then rinse and repeat. It's a lot of fun because there's a certain element in some people's minds of the underdog being victorious, being a preferable outcome. Seeing 50 people on grid, but being in a setup that they can't kill you. It's unlikely you're going to kill all 50 of them, but if you can get a few of them, that's pretty good. And the whole kind of community around it, right? So in larger fleets, you tend to see a top-down approach. You tend to see an FC giving commands. People in the fleet don't really talk, and everybody just follows the leader. People have a lot of fun with that, of course. Otherwise, people wouldn't do it. Lots of people find that very engaging and they love it. But there are others that wish that they could be a little bit more involved in choosing targets or giving commands or coming up with ideas in the middle of fights. Those are the kinds of people that end up gravitating towards small gang kiting ships or small gang brawling, anything like that. Because in the small gang environment, everyone is encouraged to participate if it's valuable. So the comms tend to be quite active. In a fleet fight, people tend to be throwing information out there. If they spot something, they tend to call it out. The commands tend to be coming from various people. So sometimes there's one person who's primarily giving all the commands, but somebody else might pipe in with, we should shoot this now because it's doing this. Or look at this. This is happening. Look at this ship burning in. We need to think about that. And as people get to know each other, as people spend time with each other, playing the game together, they start to know more about each other's way of playing. They start to know more about each other's way of communicating, and then they start to become kind of in sync. And again, that's part of the appeal of this whole endeavor is, okay, you've got a small number of ships taking on perhaps a large target, is the fantasy. When you can do that with a group of people that you've become friends with and hang out with a lot, there's a definite camaraderie, but also like that sense of victory, that sense of achievement. It's very strong, and people get addicted to it, I think. And in the end, you know, tournament play is essentially a small gang versus small gang deal. That's kind of the pinnacle of EVE PvP content in one respect. Others would say, of course, and what about the huge Sovnal battles and huge wormhole brawls? Yeah, of course, those too. But the tournament scene is definitely one of the peaks, one of the pinnacles of the game, and very profitable if you can get involved in it. If you get into a team that does well in the tournaments that happen every year, then you can make a lot of money just by shooting other people. Another thing I should point out about small gang is there's a lot more flexibility in how you fit your ship. I say that because when you deal with larger fleets, the FC tends to dictate what you should put in your ship module slots, how you should fly it, what you should shoot, etc., where you should go. And like I say, that can be a lot of fun. But if you're the kind of person who wants to experiment with different strategies, wants to try goofy things that other people haven't tried before, wants to set up traps for people, wants to get one over on your opponent in the long term, small gang is definitely that, more in that direction. So in most small gang fleets, you will get options. You know, you'll be able to say, well, I'm bringing this, as long as it is fast enough, and as long as it shoots far enough, and as long as you know how to use it. It's quite rare that a small gang group will complain. Some groups can be a little bit particular about their kill boards. They don't want any silly losses. They don't want you flying, you know, a 4 billion-esque frigate and then dying in it all the time because it makes them look bad. And other groups don't care. That's for you to find out and decide, you know. If you like small gang stuff, do you want to be part of the elite people or the more casuals? There's a wide variety. I think that the Crucifier and the Maulus that I linked are suitable for that. You've got the Griffin as well, I suppose, but it's a bit more complicated. I think the Griffin is okay, it's fine. You can include it in this answer, but when it comes to the Maulus and the Crucifier, they can be effective at, 80 kilometers away, 100 kilometers away. You can have a major impact on the fight from 80 kilometers away, which means that all of your fleet are going to be in front of you, between the enemy and you. You're going to have lots of time to see things coming at you and maybe run away, or, you know, have more time to think about what's going on. You're also going to be able to just play the game while perhaps just aligned to a celestial. You know, for example, you could align to the sun and maintain your range and choose your targets without being constantly having to change your positioning and constantly having to make different decisions. So I think that is one of the options I would give. For people who don't like tiny ships that die as soon as they get breathed on, there are options like the tankier cruisers and battle cruisers. The trouble with those is that if you're in the wrong place and you get caught, you've just lost like 130 mil ship, and that is definitely going to happen to you over and over again until you kind of learn what to do with it. So I think there are two ends of that spectrum. The fast, tiny stuff that can shoot from 80 or affect the fight from 80 kilometers away that costs 1.5 mil, great option. Definitely great for the brand new players. But if you are determined to be a bit more kind of crucial in the fight or apply DPS, yeah, something like a Brute Dix, or if you can afford it, or the Omen is great as well. They're fast enough and impactful enough, and they've got a good skill ceiling. In other words, you know, you could stay in an Omen for the whole 12 months and you'd be learning things for the whole 12 months. You know, even though it only really shoots with a laser, the game is complex enough that if you wanted to be really good at shooting things with a laser from an omen, you could. You could become really good at the positioning. You could become really good at applying the damage. And you could carry on like that for ages. So I think those are the main ones. There are plenty of other options, and I think there's a bit of a Venn diagram that exists, you know. What ships do you have the skills to fly and that you can afford? So that's the first question, you know. What ships can your character fly well and afford to fly? Second part of the Venn diagram would be, what ships do you know how to fly? So, you know, which ships do you understand a little bit of the theory about? Do you understand a bit of the theory about why we use damps? Do you understand a bit of the theory about tracking and why an omen needs to act in a certain way to make his damage apply? So, yeah, second part, what do you know how to fly? What are you confident in flying? Third part of the Venn diagram, what do you enjoy? You know, there's no point in playing the game and flying the ship that you hate doing. There's no point in doing the role you don't like. If you want to be really good at Logi, just fly Logi. You know, if you want to be really good at with the damps or applying the DPS, just do it. So I think the perfect ship really is the one that is in the middle of those three options. And then if you want to aspire to kind of be really good really quickly, if you want to kind of accelerate your learning and maybe FC or be a really key component of fleets, I think the tackle role is probably the one with the, well, most in-your-face learning curve, right? If you fly tackle for a few weeks, you'll learn a lot, an awful lot. It does make a big difference. Let's think about the battle cruiser being the slowest, usually the slowest ship in a nano fleet. Your battle cruiser could be chugging along at 1,600 meters per second. And if it gets shot, it's going to take a while to chew through its resists and armor and everything else, right? So that battle cruiser can slowly run away and either rep itself or whatever. It can survive a good number of hits before it dies. And it'll just keep moving and keep moving and keep moving. Now, it'll be surrounded by smaller, faster ships. So, well, does it matter then if your frigate only travels 1,600 meters per second as well? Because it can keep up, right? Well, the way a frigate avoids dying is not through its armor and resists. It's through its speed. If you're able to travel at 3,000 meters per second in a frigate, circling around, you know, a battle cruiser laterally to the rest of the enemy, then you're traveling at such a speed that shooting you is going to be a lot harder. So you can do this thing that we call spiraling, where you can be also running away with your battle cruiser friend, but instead of running away in a straight line, you can run away in a bit of a spiral. So you can be traveling at double the speed, and then sort of getting what we call transversal. So you're getting that lateral sideways movement versus your enemy, while at the same time also running away. And the other thing is, you know, if you in a faster ship, you can reposition faster. So if the enemy were suddenly to run away, the smaller ships then can pounce, they can run in, catch things, and then your battlecruiser friend can slowly turn around and come along and help you. Okay, we've landed. Right, what I want us to do now is, you can see this kind of structure in the middle here, and these two ibis ships. I want us to fly above them, okay? So what I want you to do is just manually pilot yourself above this big structure here. And if you didn't get the warp and you're in system with us, you can warp to any one of us. You can warp to Zero on your watch list, or anyone really. Okay, so let's get directly above this thing as if we wanted to be, you know, right above the middle of it. So put your ship as best you can above it without following somebody else, right? So do it yourself. You need to double click in space to set your trajectory. You can then use control space to stop. And if you've got your tactical overview on, so that's the next to your capacitor, you've got these buttons on the left. You've got tactical overlay, which looks a bit like, to me, a ripple of water with a fish in line. That's the one that gives you kind of probably the most optimal setup. You get to zoom out a bit further. You get to see these lines, these circles on grid. If you hover over your modules when you're in the tactical overview, you'll end up with big red rings around the range of that module. You might have a dotted line circling as well to show things like fall off range. Okay, so try and bunch up now as a group, right, in the middle, without really approaching anyone or following anyone in particular. I want you all to kind of be bunched up so that we're all, there's a big mass of us now in the center. We kind of need to, without talking perhaps, just somehow get all together. I imagine these two Ibis fellows are a little bit confused right now, but that's okay. Okay, so we're largely in a group here, okay? So in a fight scenario now, imagine there were only 5 or 6 of us. We might want to reposition, right? There might be perhaps an enemy that's warped in. There might be a reason that we need to reposition. So we might give commands relative to things that we can all see in space together, okay? So one of the most common ones would be to say, oh, everyone head towards the sun, right? So let's kind of do that now. Obviously, the sun is right there on grid with us. I want us to basically head towards the sun, and then I want us to curve down and underneath this structure, okay? So we want to be in the same position we're in now, but underneath instead of above it. And we don't want to go directly through the structure. We want to travel towards the sun. Then we want to turn, and we want to kind of manually orbit around this structure. Imagine that structure was able to tackle you if you got too close. Yeah, you've got the Ibis there, I suppose. There's 100 kilometers away from me. Maybe you could use that as a point of reference. Oh, it's gone now. Great. Yeah, so try and get, I don't know, perhaps 120 kilometers away from the Boed Rex, but underneath them. Okay, so now that we've done a bit of maneuvering, I can talk a bit about some of the small gang things you need to consider. One of the things is your capacitor, right? Now, in a small gang environment, you tend to use your micro warp drive, usually micro warp drive, a lot. That takes a lot of capacitor. Just fitting a micro warp drive cuts your capacitor pool down, and then using it obviously eats a lot of capacitor. Sometimes your weapons also do that. So if you're flying a laser boat, it's going to cost you cap in order to fire. But for some ships, like missile ships and certain projectile turret ships, for example, they don't require capacitor to fire their gun. Your capacitor is kind of like a secondary life pool, really. It's like an energy pool. You've got a limited amount of capacitor when you undock. doing things like warping, propping, shooting things often uses up this capacitor. It regenerates over time, and it regenerates faster the closer it gets to around about 23% empty. So at around that 23% empty point, it's charging up at its most optimum rate. Okay? If you go beyond 23% capacitor and you start to hit, say, 20% capacitor, 19% capacitor, well, suddenly your capacitor recharge rate starts to drop off a bit of a cliff. So in other words, if you use up all of your capacitor, it'll recharge quite slowly until it reaches about 15%. Then it'll speed up a little bit, and then it'll reach a bit of a peak at around 23, and then beyond 23, the rate of recharge will just slowly reduce. So in other words, it's kind of like pointless keeping your capacitor 100% full because you're not really benefiting from what it can do for you. But you don't want to use it all up to the point where you have none left, because then things like your hardeners and your guns and your micro warp drive and your points and scrams and webs and all these things, they won't work. It's useful to get to know which modules on your ship take up a lot of capacitor. So for my ship here, I know that the things that eat capacitor are the hardener. They eat a small amount of capacitor, just a tiny amount. So I can kind of leave that running as much as I want. My micro warp drive, well, I know that I can run my hardener and my micro warp drive forever, and I'll never run out of cap, okay? I can check that by going to the fitting window, and I can simulate, and I can just put the modules on that I'm talking about. And I can see that if I've got my micro warp drive and my hardener running, I'm stable, as it says. And what he means by stable is that it may reduce down to 50%, 40%, even 30% or less, but it won't run out completely, because the maths work out that as long as you don't get neutered off, you're going to be able to... Oh, I'm drifting, am I? Is this something that... Yeah, I'm getting connection issues. Is this something that happens? Yeah, I see. Gotcha. So just finishing off what I was saying, right? So I can run my micro warp drive and my hardener as much as I want, right? If I want to rep people and I use one repper, then my capacitor runs out in 3 minutes 30 seconds. That's fine. I just won't use all of them all of the time. And that's basically how you tend to operate, right? So if I was trying to rep people, I would see, well, could I perhaps not use my micro warp drive now? So in other words, when you're flying in small gang, you need to kind of make some choices. It's unlikely that your small gang ship will be cap stable with everything running. It's supposed to be like that. You need to make a choice. Am I going to use my micro warp drive now? Am I going to shoot now? And am I going to tackle now? Am I going to do a combination of those things? But you can't do them all at once, usually. Now, sometimes you can, and of course, different fits, different horses for courses, whatever you want. But generally, you know, your cap is a part of your survival. If you run out of cap, then you've run out of mobility, you've run out of some of your defense, and you know, you might die. Yeah, okay. So now let's actually do something. Yeah, let's see if there's any questions first. Any questions? Okay, so then the links are just about to fire, okay? So there's one set of links, and then there's the other set of links. Those links are, I think the range is about 33 kilometers from the ship. So that's another important thing in small gang, is that if you have links on field, if you can be near enough to the link ship so that you get links, then you should. Very advanced tactics involve people holding back the links until everybody's in range, people calling this out. That's quite far down the line in your journey of learning how to small gang, but it's important to mention that those links are going to give you huge bonuses. Okay, so for those of you that have links, you'll see at the moment you'll have above your capacitor 3 extra symbols. They'll be skirmish burst, there'll be shield burst, and there'll be information burst. Those are kind of in that order, the sort of the typical small gang links that you're going to see. So the skirmish links, right, we've got 3 bonuses being applied here. One is 14.9% reduction in your signature radius. That means that you appear 14.9% smaller to other ships. That means it takes them longer to lock you, you're harder to shoot, various effects like that. Then we have agility bonus, 14.9%. That means that you're 14.9% more agile. Find it that much easier to turn, that much easier to align and warp and things like this. Then we have the basic, almost 30% increase to your speed. So the bonus you get from your micro warp drive or your afterburner is increased further by another almost 30%. So then if you hover over your maximum speed, you'll see that, like for me in my scimitar here, it's 3,000 meters per second. Without the links, it wouldn't be that fast. And then the last one then is the bonus to your range for your tackle modules. So you have your webs, your warp disruptors, and your scramblers, more range on those. These things they also benefit the heated version of that. So, your webs will typically be 10 kilometers for the T2. With that 30% increase, you're going to get 13 kilometers. And if you overheat, you're going to get even more. If you're in a ship that's bonused for things like tackle and webs, then that's where these things start to really add up. If you've got something like a hyena, which can have perhaps up to 35, 40 kilometer web range with the links, these things get even more powerful and effective. And then the shield, I'll run through these quickly. I've set this up so that we've got increased resistances across the board for shields and additional shield HP. So you've got more buffer and more resistance just to make us a bit more survivable. And then the last one is information links. So this is about your targeting range in the main. There are other information links that are useful, but in this environment with newer players, I think targeting range makes the most sense. Because one of the frustrating things about moving around a lot on grid and moving away from your enemy and then moving back in is you lose your locked targets, and that can be quite disorientating and it can take time to relock. So having extra lock range kind of makes it a bit easier. Okay, any questions before we do something else? Exactly. And you shouldn't be chewing through capsticks when there's nothing really going on. So if there's no fighting happening, if there's no pressure, then you kind of want to be preserving those things if you can. Capsticks are there for when you're actively engaged in the fight and you want to run 3 or 4 different modules at the same time. It gives you that ability to do that, but it's normal that a ship set up with capsticks, you should be able to do some of your flying without using them and only have to use them when the pressure's on. It's generally good advice to overheat your cap, because then it increases the speed at which you can use it again, and they don't generate a ton of heat. So you can usually overheat those quite a lot. But when it comes to overheating things like micro warp drives and webs and jams and things like this, they generate tons of heat. So you can generally, on a small ship, only get away with 1, 2, or 3 overheated cycles of your micro warp drive before you burn it out. So, use sparingly in the smaller ships. Okay, let's get everyone to recall drones. We're going to move off this grid shortly. Ah, I thought it was fleet, because it's saying 18 people are getting links when I do it. Yeah, so giving links to 32 people. But there's 38 people in fleet. Yeah, that's interesting. To be honest, I'm not sure. I knew that it was possible to give links without us being in the same corp, but I don't know how it works exactly. Yeah, I think so. Ah, yes. Yes. Okay, so everyone recall your drones. Right, in a moment, we're going to actually shoot some stuff, okay? So, this is where people might actually... It's not impossible. I doubt it. But we're going to be landing on some grids where there'll be some NPCs to shoot. What I'll do is I will say, let's go above them, or let's go below them, or let's run away towards the sun. Okay, those are probably the 3 things that I'm going to suggest we do. And the idea being that we all kind of try and stay together. This is not an exercise in how fast can we shoot all the NPCs that we see, right? This is an exercise in landing on the grid. Then we get together and then we choose our targets and shoot them. Okay, so we're going to simulate perhaps small ships trying to catch us and shoot them first, that kind of thing. So if you need to shoot something because it's tackling you and you might die, then go ahead and we'll shoot things. So this might be a bit chaotic, but if we're not at risk and we're not going to die, we're not going to shoot anything straight away. So just a question there from Wolf. Are links bonuses diminishing? The way that links work is you get all of the bonus for the strongest link that is applying to your ship. So you can't have 3 lots of skirmish links that add up together, but you can have 3 ships giving skirmish links, and your ship will just get the best one that it is in range of. They're very powerful. You might have heard of snakes as an example of implants that people use. Snake implants increase your speed, okay? With the most expensive snakes, you can probably get around 30 to 40% increase in your speed. Well, with the best links, you can get a 30% increase in your speed. Now, of course, if you're using snakes and links, great, fantastic. Oh my God, you're super fast. But what I'm getting at is I can give basically 32 people the effect of a snake pod with 1 Bifrost. Anyway, it's a lot cheaper too. Anyway, right, we're going to go and do something. So everyone get ready to warp. Okay, fleet take warp.
Warp drive active.
Now, if you're interested in stand-ins to Galente or Minmatar, then shooting these NPCs might affect your stand-ins to Galente and Minmatar, I think. To be honest, this is nothing really to worry about, but I'm just pointing it out in case that does affect people, okay? Right, so first of all, let's go down, right? So everybody burn down, away from these rats. But don't go too far. Let's stop at about 50 kilometers away from them. Yeah, that's fine. You can lock things. Okay. When we get about 50 kilometers away, we're going to stop. And we're just going to kind of hang out. Okay, there's nothing really here that will chase us. So what I'll say now is, once everybody's kind of moved away from them, we'll start engaging. So don't go too far. Now get to about 40 kilometers away from them. That's roughly where my scimitar is. And if anyone thinks they're going to die, start shouting and I'll check, see if you need reps. Okay, that's decent. Okay, so I don't know if you can all see that target broadcast, but let's do Mercenary Lieutenant first. And then we'll do this one. Then this one. And then this one. Okay, now I want everyone to start doing the same thing, but we're going to go... Let's see what's going on. Oh, we need to travel back now. That was extremely fast. Right. Okay, we're going to go back to Erlen. So everyone set destination as Erlen. I will put the link in fleet. So some of the principles of the approach, typical approach in small gang is if your guns are small enough, they'll apply to almost everything. So there's a lot of medium and small guns in this fleet, right? There are one or two ships here with large guns, and if you use large guns in this scenario, then you need to know how to make those things apply. That's not something I'm going to cover right now in any detail. But small guns that can shoot far enough that you can kill stuff from about 40 or 50 kilometers away is generally the kind of rule of thumb. You can be a small gang with blaster ships and shoot things at short range and brawl, of course, but that's not really what we want to talk about today. Okay, so once everyone comes into this system... Everyone take this walk. So imagine now that we were a small gang. We're going to land on this grid, right? We need to quickly make a decision about which direction we're going to go in or what we're going to shoot. So to begin with, when we land, we're just going to pick a place to meet up and travel to that place on the grid, okay? At some point soon, I'm going to be talking to you about the sun, because wherever you are in any system, there's always a sun. So that's where the sun tends to be. So we're going to go up this time, okay? So we're going to go up and above this group. So just get your prop mods on and just start traveling up and above. Don't go too close. Okay. And then we're going to see if we can get some of these things to chase us. So once we're above, stop running away and just keep moving, right? I want you to keep moving this time, but maybe just travel in circles above this group from about 35 kilometers away. So you want to be about 35 kilometers away from the stuff below us, and you want to be kind of going around in circles. The way I do that, I'm showing on screen on stream right now, is I'm just turning my camera, then I'm double clicking in space, then I'm turning my camera again a bit, and then I'm double clicking in space. And I'm just doing like a circular movement around and around. So I'll travel a bit, then I'll turn a bit, I'll turn a bit. If I turn too fast, my speed will drop. So I'm just trying to keep my speed up, 80 or 90% of its maximum. I'm just trying to stay above these things. Now, if I was in a tackle ship, I'm in the exact right range now to keep a tackle on them, but also be traveling at, over 2,000 meters per second. And if I'm in any other sort of ship, I'm also quite safe. Yeah. So certain ships kind of cheat. So good examples would be assault frigates. They have a bonus, which means that their penalty to sig radius is reduced when they use their micro warp drives. The same, I think, has just been applied to the cruiser equivalent. Yeah, so they are a no-brainer, right? Generally, if you just gonna repair this omen, Rika, don't worry. I got you. Yeah, if you're in one of those ships, you can use your micro warp drive, no problem at all. Otherwise, my understanding is that it kind of balances out. Generally, if you're traveling slowly with a small signature radius, no micro warp drive, then that's almost the same as traveling at full speed or near to full speed with a micro warp drive on, because they kind of balance each other out, if that makes sense. That's my understanding of it. If anyone's got any better answers, then please do. So I want everyone to be above these rats now, right? So definitely, yeah, we go. That's good. Yeah, so free fire on these rats. Let's see what happens next. Notice how we're all bunched up. That's really good. Now,
The capacitor is empty. The capacitor is empty.
yes. If you're not being shot and you're not in any danger and your positioning is optimal, then if you're in a turret ship, you're going to hit your target better if you just stop your ship, you know? Also, if you maybe just travel at the same sort of direction as the ship you're shooting, you're going to get even more accuracy. One of the skills to learn in EVE is to know when to stop moving, when to conserve cap and things. So once you get to the point where you're thinking, well, if I just cut my prop mod now, I'm conserving cap, I'm not getting shot, nobody's running in on me. That's probably a wise decision, right? Certainly in tournament settings, you know, there's lots of times where once you know you're in the right position and everything, you cut that prop mod and you focus your cap on something else. So we've kind of simulated landing on a grid, getting together at the optimum range, and then shooting things. The next thing we're going to simulate is running away and still shooting things, or running away all in the same direction. And then after that, doing that but changing our direction. So the staying in the ball is purely me giving you an instruction, right? So you don't, the ball in reality is not as tight as this in actual PvP. And if you're in a griffin or a crucifier, then you're going to want to be further away. If you're in a tackle ship, you're going to want to be a little bit closer in. So you kind of have this variance, but it's just that the majority of the time you want to all be generally in the same direction versus your enemy. It becomes very messy when you're trying to all run away from the enemy and get them to chase you, but then you're too spread out, because then you all get isolated and it's very hard then to group up again. But this is all open for debate, right? Open for discussion. You might decide as your group, one of your tactics is to do that on purpose. You might decide that it's a good idea to look like you're splitting up and getting lost, and then all of a sudden you've got a tactic and you turn around. So these are just general kind of strategies that are quite common. Yeah, so this time we're going to pick a direction, but we're going to ask you to go to your optimal range, okay? So, right, these things are tiny, so don't shoot them. What we're going to do is we're going to go through the gate first, right? So Just go below the gate, not completely on top of it, just go below it. But when I say below, kind of close to it as well, because we're going to take the gate soon. So I mean optimal, but that is a, you know, a valid thought, right? You might think, well, with my particular ship, my optimal is 4 kilometers, but my fall off is 80. So then it's going to be like 40 kind of thing. But for most people, the optimal is kind of the marker. Okay. Yeah, you want to be probably loading different ammo. So that... That's interesting. Yeah, that's not... Yeah. Yeah. You'd think that by the name, right? Okay, everyone shoot the rats and approach the gate a bit. So make sure you're within range of this gate. We'll make sure everyone's bunched up now. These little tiny rats didn't give us a chance to practice what we were looking to practice. Okay, now the rats are dead. Make sure you recall drones. And everyone activate this acceleration gate.
Warp drive active.
When you land, you can wait, right? You don't have to move straight away and you'll stay invulnerable for a period of time. I say that because I don't know what's going on and I hear there are things. There we are, that's better. Okay, we're going to go below the first group, okay? So we're going to go below. So everyone kites down below. And this time, I'm going to try and get these rats to chase us. So go below about 20 kilometers to begin with, 30 kilometers to begin with. And then we're just going to slowly try and run away. So we're going to do something called spiraling. You can practice being in your optimal range if you want. I'm just trying to get these NPCs to chase us. They usually do. Okay. Now we're going to try and spiral down. Okay. So I want you to travel down, but in a tight spiral. So you're going to be, like I said earlier, you can do these circles where you're moving your camera, double click in, moving your camera, double click in. If you did the same thing, but you just aimed down slightly, you would be slowly moving away from your enemy as a group. But at the same time, you know, I'm traveling at 2,000 kilometers a second here. I'm not moving away from them at 2,000 kilometers a second because I'm doing a very gentle spiral downwards, right? And then generally you're looking to sort of stay as a group while you do this. And the idea is that the standing fleets in Horde or Goons are going to just ram at you and they're going to chase you. And as you can see, we're no longer in a ball, but we are in a group. You know, we're not just static, not moving. We're not anchoring on one person, but we are moving away as a group, but we're all doing our own thing. Does that make sense? So we've managed to separate out these frigates now. They're coming at us, so we can shoot the frigates that are coming at us. So shoot the closest frigates. Okay, and then we're going to spiral up now, up into the frigates. The little frigates here. And then shoot these ships as you come in. So as we approach now, we're not going to approach just straight on. We're going to do it at an angle like this spiral technique, right? And I think we should just spiral up and just generally aim for this object near the rats I'm about to broadcast. Just generally make our way up towards those in this sort of spiral fashion. And shoot them as we go. Okay, we're generally doing a good job here of staying together as a group. Like if, as Amphion was saying now, if you're in a long-range ship that can shoot from 80 kilometers, you can see how you could also be traveling up towards this group, right? Even though you're slower, like the Naga, for example, of Seamus, because we are spiraling up, Seamus could just kind of approach and keep up with us. And by approaching, Seamus can also maintain good transversal and shoot the stuff with good accuracy, right? So the smaller your ship, the faster your ship, the faster you need to, the more you need to do this spiraling, but the slower your ship, the more you're likely to be traveling kind of in straight lines. Okay, so now we've got a new group of NPCs that have appeared and we're kind of sandwiched between the two, right? So let's say now we wanted to aim for a different direction. Let's all travel towards the sun as if we were running away. So stop shooting things and just generally travel towards the sun for a moment. And we're going to try and get that kind of optimal range for the group while having the sun as our direction of travel. And then we're leaving these people kind of behind, right? So these red rats are kind of being left behind by us moving towards the sun. And the idea of moving towards the sun, the reason it's quite a common one is because wherever you are in the system, there's always things to warp to near the sun. Either that's the sun itself or plenty of other things that are in that general direction. Now, when it comes to, you know, running away towards the sun, people just end up tending to be in a long string of ships in the end. You want to be kind of zigzagging. So if you're getting away from your group, you can turn. You can start moving sideways. But you're always keeping in mind that the sun is the general direction of travel, right? So as you can see now, we are much more spread out. So if we can try and get together a bit. But traveling towards the sun, you can just do it in a kind of, either by using the same spiraling technique or kind of using this sort of zigzag side to side. What I mean by that is I'm generally moving towards the sun, but I'm traveling laterally. Then once I go too far, I'm kind of slowly turning. And then when the moment arises, I can turn and move in the other direction, the other lateral direction. These are all things you can look at in different tutorial videos in Eve. Okay, there we go. That is enough in terms of the rats. I think let's look at what Amvin was talking about, that optimal range stuff. So let's find something we can have in common here. So near those drones, there's a little building. What is it? It's a gas storage silo, right? So let's all travel below it. I don't know if you can all see it. I can't broadcast it as an object, but I'll travel there myself now. I want everyone to go below this gas storage silo. It's in the cloud. You'll soon see where it is because we'll all be there. Travel below it and then get to your optimal range for your particular offensive weapon. So if you're a tackle ship, you probably want to be 24 kilometers away from this thing. If you're a Naga, you're going to be, what, 80, 90 away. If you're in an Osprey Navy issue, probably about 40. If you're in a Crucifier, probably about 80. So what we should end up with is everyone kind of below this gas storage silo, but at their optimum range. And you don't have to worry about continuously moving, although if you want to practice that, go ahead. I just want you to, just for now, get to your optimum range. So where my scimitar is and the stalk and the bifrost are, that's 30 kilometers below this silo. Okay, so once the majority of people are in that sort of right position, directly below, directly underneath this gas silo, at a good optimal range for your ship, we'll carry on talking. Okay, good. Now let's spiral down. So as a group, imagine that there were some ships chasing us. We're going to, micro-warp drives on, we're going to just slowly spiral down. So the range from us to this gas silo is just slowly going to increase. For me, it's currently at 36. I don't want it to go up too quickly. Now, obviously, if we need to run away a bit quicker, our spiral can become a bit more harsh. You know, you can kind of tilt your camera down a bit more harshly, and you can start moving it that way. One of the things you need to learn in Small Gang is not focusing on one thing, right? So I'm very much focusing here on talking to you about maintaining the correct range, but you'd also have to be looking at the grid, what's burning in, you know, where are you aligned to, you know, your capacitor, your overheating. There's all of these things to do at the same time. Okay, good. Not bad. Not bad. We're kind of moving as a group, right? And then again, let's go towards sun. So we're going to align towards the sun now. But again, try and make it like a group effort. You want to be thinking, well, if we're all going towards the sun and the enemy is that kind of gas silo, where do you need to be? Not necessarily approaching the sun, but generally in that direction. So when you're very new at this stuff and you're in something squishy, it's generally a good idea to be aware of generally what you're aligned to. Towards the sun, you've got various options. You've got these NPC stations that I've just broadcast. You've got, there's a site, I don't know if I can broadcast that. Then you've got the sun itself. Then there's a gate to Erlen. That's another thing that's kind of in that direction. So the idea being that if you're in a small, fragile ship, I could be kind of approaching Erlen, then I could move towards the sun, then I could move towards that NPC station. So always being aligned to something is generally a good survival tactic, as is the golden rule of Small Gang. Don't get within scram range, you know, unless you're doing it intentionally or unless you know exactly what you're doing or whatever. You generally want to stay away from your enemy's scram range. It's the thing that kills you, getting scrammed. Okay, everyone drones in, and we're going to align this time towards the Erlen gate. Again, not necessarily a strict align, just generally in that direction. And we're very spread out now, that's fine. So I think I'll take us back to Jita now. Yeah, so the first question was about the settings on my display that show things that perhaps you all don't see. I'm just going to get a link for you. So there is a setting that you can activate outside of the game in the configuration files that allows you to be able to see things like the name of the ship type, the name of the pilot, their alliance, things like that, the range. Without looking at the overview table list, you can see it like in space. I'll give you a link in Fleet Chat to show you how to do that. If you want. If you want to be in like 300 person fleets, then this slows things down for you, which is the reason it's not on by default. Now this link I'm about to give is a little old. I think Windows 11 and things like Mac and things, Linux, you might need to interpret it a bit, and I'm sure there are people that can help you most people who play Eve are quite computer savvy. So with the maintaining your optimal speed while spiraling away, essentially you want to change the angle at which you're spiraling. So one of the things I would suggest you learn is how to circle underneath something while keeping it at the range you're looking for. So one of the tactics people might use is they might take some items in cargo they might use a small ship like a Malediction Interceptor. They will drop that can in space, and then they will go underneath it, say at 25 kilometers, and then target it, and then just try and keep it tackled, try and keep it, in that optimal range, while coning underneath it, as we would say. So what you're essentially doing then is you're always traveling at almost 3,000 meters per second, but you're maintaining the same range. And then from there, the next strategy is whether you want to be moving closer in or further away. So that's just about that sort of angle, that tilt as to, how much you tilt. And that comes down to experience then. If it's a Jaguar you're spiraling away from, your angle of running away is going to be much, much steeper because that Jaguar is going to be traveling as fast or faster than you. Whereas if you're running away from a battleship, well, you might only need a very shallow angle to run away because they might only be traveling at 600. It's the main thing is your position in relation to your fleet mates and your position in relation to the enemy. So the spiral technique is a way of simply staying fast while being able to manage that range. So, there's no other way that I can think of to maintain 3,000 kilometers per second while also maintaining 25 kilometers away from your enemy, right? Because if they move towards you, you need a way of moving away. If they move away from you, you need a way of chasing them. But if you chase in Eve, if you chase things head on, or you run away without moving laterally, then that puts you at risk of different things, either outrunning your enemy too much, or being shot by artillery or something like that. So it's just the one of the first sort of learning curve issues with small gang is putting your ship in the right position on the grid in relation to the friendlies, in relation to the enemy, while also being, safe by traveling at the right speed or aligning to the right thing. That's the complexity. And then on top of that, of course, you've got to manage all your modules and shoot the right thing and talk to each other. But that's the fun. So yeah, as Amvian said, the other thing is things like links, is things like Logi. The idea of moving as a kind of a loose but consistent group is that you're always in range of your friendly Logi, or near enough that you can travel back and get links or get reps. In tournament play, the ships that get isolated are the ones that die, and then that makes everything fall apart. So moving as a group is really the skill that you need to practice. It's difficult enough to all shoot the same thing. It's difficult enough to not get overwhelmed and just die as soon as you land on a grid. And then to ask people as well to manually put themselves in the right position, of course, is a huge ask. And that's why we thought this little mini practical would be just enough information to get you started on a small gang fleet proper. So the next step really is to jump in on a KSG fleet and give it a go. You could watch this video back. You could see what you think. The idea of recording this as well was to give people that chance to watch something, see it kind of in practice without having to risk an expensive ship or, kind of get put off by an overwhelming learning curve. Okay, cool. I think we'll formally call an end to it there.